Galw'r aelod.
I call the members to order, and the first item on our agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and the first question, Neil McAvoy.
First Minister, not so long ago you described it as odd that Wales doesn't have its own...
You need to ask the question on the order paper.
Excuse me. I do apologise. It's not on the order paper, First Minister? Oh, there we go, sorry.
Don't blame the order paper, Mr McAvoy.
No problem. Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government support for cricket in Wales?
Yes, via Sport Wales, we provide £537,000 this year to Cricket Wales to support the development of the game across Wales.
OK, diolch, and thank you for your patience there. Not so long ago you described it as odd that Wales doesn't have its own national cricket team. And it seems more odd now that Ireland is a full Test member of the International Cricket Council and Scotland is beating England in one-day internationals. So where is Wales? I think many people here find it bizarre that a team called England, with no Welsh players, playing under the English flag, 3 lions on the shirt, could be described as Welsh. Now, Glamorgan, who have had reservations about the Welsh team, are calling for someone to produce a business plan to explore how to have a successful county side and national side. So will your government support Glamorgan's suggestion by commissioning a feasibility study into a Welsh national cricket team, or will you let Welsh cricketers and fans continue to be so badly represented by England?
Well, ultimately, this is a matter for Cricket Wales and for Glamorgan Cricket Club, and not for the government. There is no doubt there will be a severe financial impact if we were suddenly to compete in our own names. There's a question mark as to whether Glamorgan could survive, whether the stadium would be viable, and indeed what would happen in terms of the financial support that Welsh cricket receives. I understand that there will be many who in their hearts would like to see a Welsh cricket team, but of course there are financial realities here that have to be observed, and for me I think it's best left to the cricketing authorities.
Russell George.
Diolch, Llawr. First Minister, like many sports across Wales, cricket at grassroots and amateur level is coming under significant pressure, both financially and from a participation perspective. Now, on the weekend, you may have seen that the WRU announced a pilot which would see junior rugby moved to the summer season. Now, whilst I certainly acknowledge that some of the reasons put forward by the WRU are understandable, can I ask what discussions your government has had or will be having over the coming weeks to ensure that the game of cricket in Wales is not significantly squeezed or harmed by this decision, as it's surely in everyone's interest that all sports in Wales, including cricket and rugby, have their own space to thrive?
It was an issue that was raised with me, actually, over the course of the weekend. There is significant overlap already between the sports. There was a time when people would happily play rugby in the winter and cricket in the summer, and the overlap wasn't there. Certainly wasn't there when I was in school, when we played on sloping pitches with a dull ball and one pad. It was a way to learn cricket, if I remember. But the serious point is this. I think cricket, it's important that cricket is able to appeal to young people as young as possible. The situation has improved. I know when my son was younger, he could play football at 6, rugby at 7, but cricket not until 11. That did change very quickly, and he did take part in some cricket. So I think what's important is that cricket continues to appeal to children at the youngest age possible. And in fairness, that is something that's happening now, so cricket should be able, to my mind, to hold its own.
Rhina Bjorwerth.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Llywydd.
Tools surely for encouraging youth cricket in Wales would be to have a national cricket team that young people at the length and breadth of the country could aspire to and find role models in. You say that this is not a matter for government. Let's perhaps explore what might be a matter for government. You have a major events unit, for example, that funds a host of events in order to put Wales on the map, in order to market Wales, in order to bring economic benefit to Wales. Would Welsh Government look at the possibility of even using major events funding to get the ball rolling on a national cricket team for Wales as, if you like, a permanent major event that could bring real national benefits? Well,
no, the major events funding is there for one-off events, not for continuous revenue funding. But he's right to say, of course, that it's a good way of showcasing Wales, but we don't just attract events that have Welsh teams in them, if I can put it that way. We've just had the Volvo Ocean Race. There was Welsh participation, but there wasn't a Welsh team. The point was to bring the attention of the world to Cardiff Bay and to Wales and to see what we could host. The same with the Champions League. Well, yes, there was a Welsh participation, clearly, but there weren't Welsh teams in it. So I think it's hugely important that we are able to showcase ourselves as a nation that can host major events. We've done that incredibly successfully. You know, we are by far the smallest nation, for example, to host the Champions League. Cardiff is the smallest city to host the Champions League. We've done it, and there's no reason why we can't do it again. It shouldn't just be tied to whether or not there's a Welsh team in the event as to whether we then support that event.
Question 2.
Question 2, Mohammed Ashki.
Presiding Officer, what measure will the Welsh Government introduce to prevent animal cruelty in next 12 months, please?
Well, the Wales Animal Health and Welfare Framework Implementation Plan, snappily titled, sets out the framework group and Welsh Government priorities for animal health and welfare, and the Cabinet Secretary will be making a statement on companion animal welfare later today.
Thank you very much for the reply, Minister. Since May this year, every abattoir in England is required to have CCTV cameras installed on all areas where live animals are kept. Officials vet will have unrestricted access to footage to reassure consumers that high welfare standards are being enforced. Does the First Minister agree that this is an effective way to prevent animal cruelty, and when will the Welsh Government make CCTV compulsory in our abattoirs in Wales?
Well, there are a number of controls already in place in abattoirs. Official vets are present in every single one of them. The larger abattoirs, which process the majority of animals, have CCTV, and official vets are able to access footage if they suspect welfare standards are not being met. That said, we are determined to improve standards and practices where it's necessary and reasonable to do so, and the £1.1 million food business investment funding package will assist small and medium-sized slaughterhouses to improve their facilities, including the installation of CCTV.
Cwestiynau nawr gan arweinydd.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, prostate cancer is a cruel condition that, if diagnosed early enough, has remarkable success rates, 90% plus. Regrettably, obviously, screening in some parts of the UK leaves a lot to be desired. In particular, here in Wales, regrettably, the ability to get access to the MP MRI scanner for health boards is non-existent, and people do end up having to pay considerable sums to have that scan undertaken. In England, for example, where that scan is available, it has a 92% detection rate. With the 4 health boards, which total 700,000 men within those health boards, unable to attract that type of screening, what commitment can you give as First Minister and as a government to roll out the screening so that whatever part of Wales you live in, you will have access to that screening, so that if you do require surgery or intervention, it can be done in a timely manner?
Well, an important question, and one that deserves a detailed answer, if I may, Llywydd. I can say that health boards in Wales are able to offer multi-parametric scans in line with the current guidance from NICE. That guidance currently recommends MP-MRI for people with a negative biopsy to determine if another biopsy is needed and if the management of a proven cancer will benefit from staging of the tumour. What's called PROMISE trial indicated that people with suspected prostate cancer might benefit from having their MP-MRI prior to biopsy. NICE is reviewing its guidance and is expected to issue recommendations in the early part of next year. In the meantime, evidence is being considered by the Wales Urology Board. It's fair to say there are different views among the clinicians about the implications of recent evidence, with some health boards implementing elements of a revised approach. What I can say is if NICE recommends pre-biopsy MP-MRI for suspected prostate cancer, then we would expect all health boards to amend their care pathways accordingly. In the meantime, health boards will continue to consider the evidence and pathway reforms through the Wales Urology Board.
I thank you for that detailed answer, First Minister. You know, regrettably, 10,000 men a year die from prostate cancer. It's the biggest killer of men, and some universality around the screening programme must be a compunction on the government, because actually cancer doesn't rely on postcodes, it's universal, it is. On the bowel cancer screening programme that the Welsh Government have, it has been called, at the moment, a very postcode lottery-driven screening programme, and in particular, 1 in 4 individuals are waiting in excess of 8 weeks to have their screening procedure diagnosed and actually put into practice if intervention is required. 900 people die a year of bowel cancer here in Wales. If ultimately we had a better, more robust screening system and a wider screening system that actually took into account 40 years and above, then we could drive those numbers down even further. Given we know the importance of screening, and in particular on bowel screening, what action is your government doing to shorten the waiting times that will remove that 1 in 4, 25% of people waiting in excess of 8 weeks to get the results that they require? Because it cannot be right that where the treatment is treatable, where the condition is treatable, just through waiting too long on a waiting list, you have a detrimental impact on your outcome.
With screening, it's a question of who do you target for the screening? Because you can't screen everybody. Which particular elements of the population are particularly susceptible to a particular type of cancer? Because it's not physically possible to screen everybody. We want, of course, to see consistency across the health boards. They're able to access the new treatments fund if that's appropriate for what they wish to take forward. What I can say is when we look at our urgent suspected cancer route, for example, the vast majority of people started definitive treatment within the target time of 62 days, 88.7%. 96% of patients who are newly diagnosed with cancer not via the urgent route started definitive treatment within the target time of 31 days in March 2018. So the vast majority of people do get the treatment that they should get within the right amount of time. But of course, we rely on specialists in order to advise us to make sure that we can see how we can improve screening where that's necessary.
Those improvements are desperately needed. As I said, Bowel Cancer UK say it is a national crisis that people are waiting. 1 in 4 people are waiting 8 weeks or more for that screening process to be undertaken. But what we do know from the weekend's announcement that the UK government have made is that there will be a considerable uplift in the spend available to the Welsh government to spend on health and social care here in Wales. These screening proposals, well, I can hear the chuntering from the Labour backbenchers, but the reality is that money is coming over to the Welsh Government. Now, it is perfectly right under the devolved settlement that you choose where to spend that money. From these benches, we believe that that money should be spent in the fields of health and social care to make those improvements in prostate, bowel and other treatments available to patients here in Wales. Now, will you commit today to make sure that any money that is made available to the Welsh Government is spent on those key areas so that we can see the improvements that we desperately need in diagnostic tests and waiting times and staff recruitment that other parts of the UK who are committed to delivering it into the health and social care budgets will see? We need that commitment, First Minister. Will you make it?
Well, the first thing we have to see is how much money we'll actually get, because there are 2 important points to make here. First of all, we have been informed that that money, whatever money we get, will be the source of funding to deal with pay increases. So the lifting of the pay cap will have to be financed through any money that we get via the source that he has mentioned. So that's the first thing to mention. There's no extra money on top of that. Secondly, of course, it's never the case, is it, that we get a lump sum of money to pay for a particular area, such as health or education. What happens is, of course, as he knows, is delivered via the block grant. What we don't know is that if we get the increase in health, whether we then see decreases everywhere else, in local government, in education, in all those areas that are devolved. Now, those, of course, are removed from the figure that he's just mentioned. So until we know, firstly, how much money net there'll actually be, we don't know, it won't be 1.2 billion, but how much money net there'll actually be, and until we know, of course, how much money, that we've got a fair idea that the pay deal will cost, we won't know how much money is available to spend. And until those factors are resolved, and nobody is able to do that yet, because we don't know what the any increase or not in our block grant will be in the autumn. Until we know the definitive net sum of money, it's very difficult to make any commitments at this stage.
Rwynydd Grŵp UKIP.
The UKIP Group, Caroline Jones.
First Minister, the Prime Minister announced over the weekend that there would be a £20 billion a year birthday present for the NHS in England. As a result of Barnet, Wales is expected to receive £1.2 billion, and on Sunday, a Welsh Government spokesman said that a decision on the allocation of funding would be made by your Cabinet in the usual way. So, First Minister, have you made that decision yet? And will you be using any extra monies we receive for health and social care?
Well, the only commitment we have made is that we will lift the pay cap. We've made that commitment, unusually, because normally we don't make those promises before we know how much money is allocated. So that will have to be paid for from whichever sum of money we get from the UK government. There's no extra money for it. And as I said in the answer earlier on, it's not going to be 1.2 billion. We don't know whether there'll be cuts elsewhere that will bring that figure down. Until we know what the final figure is, it's very difficult to give any commitments in terms of spending.
Thank you for that answer. My concern here is that mental health issues account for around a quarter of all health problems, yet we spend in as little as over 11% of the entire NHS Wales budget. We have seen a 100% increase in a demand for child and adolescent mental health care services. We know that depression affects 22% of men and 28% of women over the age of 65. We've seen a large rise in instances of self-harm, and each year around 300 people in Wales die from suicide. This is about twice the number of people killed in road accidents. We're clearly not doing enough to tackle mental health in Wales. So, First Minister, will you commit to using some of this additional money, whatever it may be, coming to Wales in order to ensure that mental health funding is based upon a robust assessment of healthcare needs?
Yes. In particular, of course, to look at prevention. That's hugely important. With CARMS, she is right to say that there was a significant increase in demand for CARMS, and we met that demand by allocating, if I remember, 8 million a year towards CARMS in order for them to meet the demand that was there. Mental health, as you will know, is a key priority for us in Prosperity for All. We want to make sure that mental health is seen as something that is a priority for all governments in the future, and that will shape any spending decisions that we take if there's any extra money on the table.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. As I've highlighted before many times, that 1 in 4 of us will suffer from mental ill health. A friend of a work colleague could be battling depression for years. We wouldn't know about it because, unfortunately, there is still a stigma attached to mental health issues. We all have to be more open about mental health. We wouldn't try to hide a broken leg, but we will try to hide depression. Sadly, as a result of stigma, many people end up taking their own lives. If we recognise the signs and offer non-judgmental support, many lives could be saved. So, First Minister, will you commit your government to ensuring that as many people as possible are trained as mental health first aiders, and will you look at adding the training to the school curriculum and encourage large employers to have mental health first aiders alongside the normal required first aiders? Thank you.
I'm not sure if first aid is the way to deal with it. That suggests something that is acute, something that's just arisen. I think it's more long-term than that. I take the point that the leader of UK is making in terms of how we deal with people who don't exhibit any external signs of depression. I've seen it at close hand, and I've got a fair idea of how it operates in people, but it's not always obvious to those who are not familiar with the individual involved. And that is difficult, of course, because the external signs are not there. And if you break a leg, it's obvious. The signs are there. That's why I want to make sure that when we look at mental health, we don't just look at it as a service designed to help people when they get into crisis. That we do look at ways in which we can help young people particularly. That's important. We have a counsellor in each secondary school in Wales. But what more could be done, for example, to look to help people who are not obviously in need of help. And they are the people, quite often, of course, that the system needs to identify. How that's done, of course, we will take forward with practitioners to see how we can create a service where there is more focus on prevention and less on dealing with symptoms when they become obvious.
Cymru leader Leanne Wood.
Does the First Minister agree with environmental lawyers Client Earth that the Welsh Government's plans for air quality lack clarity and detail?
Well, we are looking at air quality and how to improve it. I'm not going to agree with a firm of lawyers, obviously, that are not Welsh Government lawyers, but there is a challenge, of course, to improve air quality in the future.
Air pollution is responsible for 2,000 deaths per year in this country. It's a public health crisis, and it's your Labour government's environmental legacy. And that's why Plaid Cymru this week has launched a campaign, Clean Air Week. And my colleague Simon Thomas yesterday launched a comprehensive report on hydrogen's role in the decarbonisation of transport. Now, I would urge the First Minister to read this expert-led, in-depth report and to take heed of its recommendations. First Minister, this crisis warrants urgent action. Given that a road in Caerphilly is the most polluted outside of London, will you support our calls for a Clean Air Act for Wales, which would phase out the sale of diesel and petrol-only vehicles by 2030?
I think that's too early. I don't think the technology is ready. I do look forward to a time when electric cars become the norm. I don't think the technology is there now in terms of the range, but I think it will become available very, very quickly. 2040, which, if I remember rightly, the target is the UK government has set, is I think, probably pessimistic. But such as the development of the technology in this field, I think we will get to a position where it'll become a realistic option. Now, as somebody who's been driving a hybrid car, the battery in my car only gives me a range of 28 miles. Now, that's the problem. We need to make sure that there's enough, that the technology is right to move ahead in the way that she's described. She's right. In the meantime, what do? We can't do nothing. Well, firstly, we need to make sure that we remove areas where traffic is idling with engines on. That affects air quality. And, of course, to see more modal shift. And that means, of course, moving ahead with the improvements we're going to see in our rail infrastructure to make it more comfortable for people to travel by train in air-conditioned trains that are more frequent. And also, of course, moving forward with the Active Travel Act to make sure that where we see new developments, that cycle paths, for example, are an integral part of those developments, so that people feel they don't have to travel by car. So I think two things. First of all, creating that modal shift. And secondly, of course, looking to encourage ways to ensure that the battery cars have a much longer range in the future, and it's much easier to charge them as well than it is, and that it's much easier to charge them as well than it is at the moment. I think that's when we'll get the real change.
I take it then from your answer that you disagree with Labour-led Cardiff Council who has called for a ban on polluting vehicles by 2030. Why is Labour so unable to be consistent on any single policy area? The lack of urgency, willingness and the lack of being able to do things differently is costing people's lives. You can laugh and mutter, it is costing people's lives. Now, you have already lost a case against Client Earth and you face further legal repercussions if solutions aren't found quickly. Let me once again emphasise the scale of the problem here. Air in Cardiff and Port Talbot is more polluted than air in Birmingham and Manchester, despite the huge differences in population. This is the environment that your government is creating for future generations. First Minister, as a very first step, you could ensure that the planned automotive park in Ebbw Vale focuses on the development of hydrogen and electric vehicles, putting Wales at the forefront of the clean transport revolution. Will you at least do that?
I wonder if she or others on the plaid benches drive a hybrid car or an electric car. Silence. Well, I mean, practice what you preach. That's what I would say.
When you put in infrastructure,
well, there we are. Simon Thomas. Well.
Allow the First Minister to respond, please.
Simon Thomas is right. Simon Thomas is right. He's right. He is right to say try doing it, Fabulous. He's quite right. I don't dispute that at all, which is why the technology isn't ready yet. It does need to be moved forward. But of course, I notice that nobody even drives a hybrid, apparently, which is something that I've been doing for 3 years. Anyway, look, the point is this, isn't it? How do we create clean air? That's an important point. Port Talbot has a steelworks in it. And that means inevitably that the air quality there may not be as good as it would be in places where that industrial operation isn't there. But we need it to be there. And in fairness, Tata have made a great deal of effort and taken many strides in reducing their emissions over the years, and that has had an effect on Port Talbot. Port Talbot also has a traffic problem, which is not easy to resolve, which will need to be looked at in the future. Cardiff, well, yes, I think it's right to say that it's probably easier to drive an electric car in Cardiff if people are commuting a short distance. That's something to encourage, and the infrastructure is being Well, you know, she makes the point about the ministerial fleet when nobody in her own party is driving that kind of car, given the long distances. Yes, but I am not the one, am I? I am not the one saying that we should move to battery-operated cars as quickly as possible. They are. Well, practice what you preach. The second thing is, of course, and in the short term, the way to do this is to encourage more people out of their cars, and also, of course, to ensure that people are able to use the public transport network as conveniently as possible. We are doing that. Despite the criticism the Plaid Company launched at the rail franchise last week, the only people who criticised it. We will make sure that the whole of Wales has the best rail structure in Britain. We've shown the way for the rest of Britain. It's no longer any good for people who use the Valley Line services to travel on ancient trains with no air conditioning and an unreliable service. That's going to change. People will have the trains that they deserve. People will be able to access the cycle routes that they deserve. People will see, as we have taken powers now over buses, they will see an integrated bus and train and light rail network. And that is what we offer the people of Wales, a real vision to plug that gap until such time as the technology is available and the range is available for battery-powered cars.
Question 3.
Question 3, Paul Davis. Well, the First Minister outlined the Welsh Government's economic priorities for Pembrokeshire for the next 12 months.
The Prosperity for All National Strategy and the Economic Action Plan set out the actions we are taking to improve the economy and business environment across the whole of Wales.
I met with a relatively new business in my constituency recently called Composite Cymru, who produce carbon fibre components for vehicles, and the business is now looking to expand in order to produce other products too. I'm sure you would agree with me that it's important that we do everything that we can to support a business like this by securing access to funding so that the business can grow and that the local economy can benefit from that growth. So can you tell us what the Welsh Government is doing to ensure that small businesses, particularly small businesses in rural areas, can access financial support so that they can grow and develop for the future and improve the local economy?
Well, of course, we are committed to supporting SMEs and small businesses, and we've invested £86 million in from now to 2020 to ensure that small businesses and SMEs receive business support through the Business Wales programme, and it's a pleasure to see that there's been an increase of 10.6% of businesses in Pembrokeshire since 2011. And of course, the investment that has been made in the broadband system has made a huge difference, ensuring that businesses can remain in more rural areas and not having to establish in more less rural areas.
Question 4, Vicky Howell.
How will the South Wales Metro improve access to public transport in the Cynon Valley?
Well, Aberdare and the wider Cynon Valley will benefit from an increase to 4 services per hour in 2022. And more immediately, the Sunday service trial that's currently operational will be made permanent in December 2018.
Thank you, First Minister. I welcome those comments on the rail aspect of the Metro, but I think it's important to note that from its inception, the Metro project has been promoted as an integrated transport solution. The geography of the valleys mean that it's often our most impoverished communities that can be furthest away from the train links on the valley floor. So for them to benefit from better access to the jobs market, it is crucial that they're served by strong bus links that feed in to those train services. So First Minister, what reassurances can the Welsh Government give that those bus links remain at the heart of the Metro vision?
Well, members will know the frustration that many of us feel when constituents come to us and say, is there anything you can do about this bus route that's been cut? And the answer is, well, it's nothing to do with government. It's all run by the private sector, apart from subsidised routes. Well, that has to come to an end, because in most parts of Wales, there's effectively a private monopoly on bus services. They can do as they see fit in terms of which routes they run. Now that we have responsibility and control over the bus services in Wales, there's now the opportunity to create that integrated bus, light rail and train system that we've wanted to see for a long time in Wales. She's right to say there are many cross-valley routes, for example, that are not served by rail, but are important in terms of what they deliver through bus services. now we can start looking from phase 2 and 3 and beyond at a properly integrated public transport system for the whole of Wales. And these are exciting times.
David Melding.
First Minister, we're already seeing from the population statistics for RCT and Aberdare being very important that there's an increase in population of people between 30 and 40 as some people are relocating to those areas to purchase family-size housing. This is leading to a larger or more diverse social mix, which itself regenerates areas like Aberdare. But an essential part of this, to really build on this trend, is to ensure the Metro provides excellent transport, because a lot of younger people do not want their lives ruled by the car and facing congestion.
They do. You're quite right. They are more enlightened, I suppose, than many of the generations older than them. We are looking, of course, the member for Llanelli has offered his strong support for that. I'm glad he considers it a part of the younger generation, but I'll not comment on that. We are looking, of course, at a system of half-price travel for young people as well, to make it easier for them to access the network that we will have in place. But he is quite right, the member is quite right to point out that we have to make sure that as we encourage people out of their cars, that we have a rail system that is good enough to attract them onto into the trains. For too long, they've had to put up with uncomfortable trains, with condensation running down the windows, with indifferent punctuality. Those days must change, and they will change as a result of the new franchise.
Mick Antonin.
First Minister, the improvements to the service in Cynnon Valley will obviously come through to Pontypridd, but are probably unlikely to go as far as the benefits to Pontyclean, where you have a population from Pencoed to the surrounding area of around 100,000. The main benefit that probably people in Pontyclean will see is that there will be more trains going through Pontyclean, but not necessarily stopping in Pontyclean. At the moment, there is one train an hour, 2 at peak times, normally 2 carriages, and there is incredible frustration in terms of people actually even being able to access the service at all because of the congestion. I wonder if something Welsh Government would have a look to ensure that in this growing area, this vitally important area, part of my constituency, that there will be very specific improvements to the rail service, but to the frequency of trains and the quality of trains and the number of carriages to enable to deliver people, whether it be from Pencoed through Pontyclean to Cardiff and vice versa.
My daughter travels to Cardiff on a Monday to Tuesday. She is somebody who lobbies me constantly on this issue. She sees the overcrowding on the trains. She gets on in Bridgend, but of course with the stops at Pencoed, at Llanharan, then at Pontyclean, she sees the overcrowding that takes place there with a 2-carriage train in the early morning. Bear in mind, of course, that the last franchise was let on the basis that there would be no increase in passenger numbers at all. That was unfathomable thinking at the time. This is not what we've done this time around. So it does mean looking at more frequent services to serve its constituents. It'll mean in time as well, of course, looking at the old Coke Works line up to Beardyne to see whether that can be used, probably like Trail, whether that can be used to link back into the main line to provide a service for people at the stations from Talbot Green, I suppose, Western Talbot Green, onwards and upwards up to Beardyne.
Question 5, please.
Question 5, Llywydd Griffith. Thank you, Llywydd. What steps is the Welsh Government taking to reduce reoffending rates?
Well, the Welsh Government and Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service in Wales have worked together to develop a joint framework to support positive change for those at risk of offending in Wales.
Virtually every piece of research has looked at the size of prisoners, shown that smaller prisons have better outcomes for prisoners and communities as compared to large prisons and super prisons particularly. So if you are serious about reducing the levels of reoffending, then would you commit, if and when these issues are devolved, to plough a new furrow in Wales and to move away from this model and ensuring that we don't see more super prisons develop here in Wales?
Yes, we will. I think we must reconsider both the justice and the court system in Wales, and also prisons for young offenders, and this is something that we're considering at present, because if we're going to see the devolution of the justice system, then we must have a policy. But there's no point having a policy once devolution takes place. You have to have one beforehand, and this is something that we as a government have foreseen, and we are considering and developing a policy at present.
Diolch, Llywydd. And First Minister, I'm sure you'd agree with me, key to low offending rates, key to low reoffending rates is training prior to release. And I recently opened a very successful jobs fair at Presiding Open Prison in my constituency. It was hosted by, partially by Careers Wales, where ex-offenders had the opportunity to meet with employers, both local and from further afield, to see how they can best apply valuable skills that they picked up whilst in prison. I thought this was a very worthwhile scheme. Prescoid has an excellent record of rehabilitation. Can you tell us what the Welsh Government is doing, whilst I appreciate the prisons aren't devolved, what Welsh Government is doing to support organisations like Careers Wales so that ex-offenders, whilst they are in prison, do get that valuable opportunity to retrain so that upon release they can reintegrate with society and give society back those skills which they picked up in prison?
Well, youth offending teams have played a significant role in reducing reoffending amongst young people. They've looked to support prevention, early intervention and diversion. As somebody with a significant experience in representing young people at the sharp end in the courts, what I would find is, yes, they can quite often get released from a young offenders institution having had training, but they fall back in the same peer group and at the same habits. So yes, training is hugely important. I very much welcome what's being done at Prescoid. But also, of course, those teams will know that it's hugely important to move people away from a peer group that might have got them into trouble in the first place, and often away from drugs as well, because the rate of reoffending with people who have abused drugs is enormously high. So I think it's a holistic approach that's needed, but what he's described as happening in his own constituency is a hugely important part of that approach.
Question 6, Neil Hamilton.
How does the Welsh Government assist health boards in the planning of healthcare in Mid and West Wales?
Yes, the NHS Wales Planning Framework 2018-21 sets out the principles which health boards should follow when developing their integrated medium-term plans. We've also set out our vision for the future of health and social care services in the long-term plan, A Healthier Wales, which was launched last week.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. As he knows, a significant part of Mid and West Wales is within the Betsy Cadwallader Health Board area. As at the end of March, there were 5,714 patients that were waiting more than 9 months for treatment in hospital. And under Betsy's current plans, many orthopaedic patients will still be waiting more than a year for treatment, and 4,200 generally will wait more than 9 months to be treated, whereas in Powys, that 9-month wait has actually been eliminated. Betsy also says that there's a systemic deficit of 13,500 patient pathways on the basis of patient demand. So that must mean that they are not being funded properly to provide a suitably comprehensive system of healthcare for the people of that region. Is it acceptable to the Welsh Government that under Betsy's plans, this is a health board that's actually planning to fail?
No, the Health Secretary updated members last week on the progress made in some areas. He was also clear about the significant challenges that do remain and the support that will be in place for the next phase of work. It's right to say that some services have been de-escalated. Maternity services, of course, in a very difficult place at one point, were de-escalated as a special measures concern in February, and that demonstrates what can be achieved with focused action and support. And that is the model that we plan to use in ensuring that there is further de-escalation in the months to come.
Angela Burns.
Presiding Officer. Of course, we do know a little bit better now what is happening in Betsy Cadwallader and what support the Welsh Government is offering that health board, simply because we've raised it here so many times that we've finally managed to get an answer. I wondered now, First Minister, if you might be able to enlighten us as to the types of levels of support that the Welsh Government is offering the Aelodau'r Health Board, which, as you know, is in a form of special intervention. They've already been in it for over 2 years. We don't want to see their situation deteriorate or continue for as long as the Betsy Cadwallader Health Board situation has. Surely the objective is that you go in, you give them the support, they put themselves right, and then they come back out of special measures. That's the way we should be running our health board. So perhaps you can just give us an overview of what you're doing for our health board, because I found it exceptionally difficult to try to get some real clear, crystal clear answers on this matter from the Cabinet Secretary for Health.
Well, I can say that in 2015 to 16 and 2016 to 17, we did provide Aelodau'r with additional non-recurrent funding of £14.4 million as short-term structural support in recognition of the financial challenges facing the board. On the 23rd of May, the Health Secretary announced the findings of a review which partially confirmed the view that Aelodau'r faces a unique set of healthcare challenges that have contributed to the consistent deficits incurred by the board and its predecessor organisations as well. And as a result, £27 million of additional recurrent funding has been released to the Health Board from during this financial year. That will place the Health Board on a sounder funding basis going forward, and of course it will help the board to develop and transform services in the future.
Simon Thomas.
I don't know, First Minister, if you've had a chance to see the Ombudsman's report on the distressing case of Ellie and Chris James of Haverfordwest, whose son died in Glangwili Hospital. There were a host of failings described in that Ombudsman's report, compounded by the decision to describe their son's death as stillborn, despite the fact that he had signs of life after being born, and that in itself was as a result of several failings, including, for example, failing to monitor heartbeat. This has happened in Glangwili with a young mother being taken from Withybush to Glangwili, a failure to escalate, something we told wouldn't be happening when the services were taken from Withybush to Glangwili, of course. I hope you'll join with me in extending deeper sympathies to the family and the circumstances that they have suffered. But in particular, I'd be interested to know what specific steps you're taking in line with the Ombudsman's conclusions that the Health Board implements the recommendations of this report now, and whether you're taking any further direct action to ensure that we have the highest standards of neonatal care in our Health Board area.
Nobody could fail to be moved by what these parents have gone through. And of course, I join him in expressing my enormous sympathy for what has happened to them, of course, and there are all of us, I'm sure, in this chamber who will more than empathise with the situation that they find themselves in, of course. Well, what should be done as a result? First of all, the Ombudsman's report was clear in its findings that the care provided was unacceptable, by more than one hospital, but unacceptable. The Health Board has accepted the report's recommendations in full. They have sent their action plan to us. Officials will now monitor the actions taken by the Health Board to ensure that the recommendations within the report are implemented. There has already been a great deal of learning and improvement in practice as a result of what is, of course, a very sad case, and we will ensure that that continues. As part of the learning process, I can say that we expect all NHS organisations to reflect on this case to identify any learning to improve patient care within their own respective organisations as well. So, yes, Aelodau'r will take action. That action will be monitored by us.
Question 7.
Question 7, Bethan Syed.
Provide an update on Welsh Government policy in relation to the criteria for the awarding of grants to companies.
Yes, the financial support we provide to businesses plays a vital role in helping them to start, to sustain and grow, and of course to enable them to deliver wider economic benefit. But businesses receiving such support must satisfy grant terms and conditions, and any breaches may result in the recovery of that grant.
Thank you for that answer. You will know that Celtic Wealth Management had a grant from your government for financial services, but instead decided to use that money to rip off steelworkers in the Talbot area and other people with defined pension benefits. This effectively amounts to cold calling and is something that is unethical. I'm wondering why it's taken you 7 months to even comment on this in any way, shape or form, and why you are not taking decisive action as a government to root out the problem in relation to this particular firm, which if you go on their website, there is now no longer any information on it. There are 44 steelworkers in my area taking class action against Celtic Wealth Management and other bodies that are involved. If you are going to be delivering grants, why were you not able to check what they were doing before you gave them that grant, and what are you now doing to ensure that this particular company does not receive further money from this government?
Well, the subsequent practice by a business does not mean they were engaged in that practice when the grant was received. But she's right to say that in 2014, Celtic Wealth Management did receive an offer of financial support. If there has been illegal mis-selling, that would be a breach of our conditions, and we will take action to recover any money that we have given them. Now, the first thing that has to happen is there has to be an investigation, to my mind, by the FCA and by the other regulators. They're responsible ultimately for enforcing the laws governing financial services, but we will continue to examine the situation. As I say, quite clearly, if there is a breach of the conditions of the financial support that we have provided, we will take action to recover that money.
Susie Davis. Diolch, Llywydd. In your interim annual reports on grants management 26-17, it states that the permanent secretary was to chair the Improving Efficiency Board with the aim of, and I quote, reducing bureaucracy by identifying administrative work which is of low value or which could be undertaken less frequently or in a different way or not at all. The work started in May last year and was to complete in 2018 by being taken on apace. Has that work now been completed? Have there been any financial savings for your government? And if there have been, are they more or less than you expected? And are you anticipating more applications for grants now that there's more money available to meet them?
Well, there's less money because we get less money from the UK Conservative government. So it's not as if there is a sudden windfall of money that we can draw on in order to help businesses. But we continually look to improve our offer to businesses in terms of grant funding, particularly to remove duplication, because the temptation sometimes is to create a number of different grant schemes in order that different applications are able to fit properly. Now, that can lead to a proliferation of grant schemes in time, and the work that's ongoing is looking at slimming down potentially the number of grants that are available and simplifying the way in which they're applied for.
Inhet.
So there are now 143 accredited employers paying the real living wage in Wales across the public, private and third sector, helping to address the pay and gender inequalities in the workplace, with the Welsh public sector spending approximately £6 billion annually through procurement. Will you update the Assembly on the adoption of the Code of Practice on Ethical Employment and Supply Chains, which commits companies to sign up to consider paying the real living wage?
Well, I can say that 86 organisations have already signed up to the code, which commits public, private and third sector organisations to a set of actions that tackle illegal and unfair employment practices. The 4 supporting guides that make up the code contain tools and advice to help put those commitments into practice. They include, for example, tackling unfair employment practices and false self-employment, tackling modern slavery and human rights abuses, implementing the living wage through procurement and blacklisting. All organisations that receive funding from Welsh Government, either directly or via grants or contracts, are expected to sign up to the code.
Ac yn ola, cwestiwn 8.
Finally, question 8, Llywydd.
What action is the Welsh Government taking to make sleep medication for children and young people with neurodevelopmental conditions more easily available?
Well, currently there are no medicines containing melatonin licensed in the UK for the treatment of neurodevelopmental disorders in children and young people. We are guided by the recommendations of NICE and the All Wales Medicines and Strategies Group.
Thank you, First Minister. Families with children with neurodevelopmental conditions often report that getting their child to sleep is one of the most stressful and difficult times of the day. One constituent came to see me recently. They couldn't settle their son until 4 in the morning, causing chaos in the house and stress for the whole family. When children do get to see a specialist, they're often prescribed melatonin as a way of settling them until they get into a routine, but that's not currently licensed for children, and GPs won't prescribe it. Given that in the Hywel Health Board there's still a waiting list of some 18 months to see a specialist, though this is improving, this does cause great stress for families who are unable to get help from primary care and unable to get to see a specialist consultant. We must do better in offering them something, First Minister, to help them and their families deal with this very difficult condition. Would he look to see what is practical within the constraints, and even better, try and remove some of the constraints?
I think the difficulty is that it's not licensed for use at the moment. Now, medicine's licensing is not devolved. The use, once a medicine is licensed, the use of it then is then governed by NICE and the Always Medicine Strategy Group. But of course, for GPs are governed, and Aelodau'r is over there, but GPs are governed, as I understand it, by rules that tell them what they cannot prescribe, not what they can prescribe. So it is possible for a GP to prescribe melatonin. It's a matter for individual prescribers. There's no restriction on GPs doing that, but of course, any GP is going to ask the question, well, is this something I should be doing? Is it something that I regard as clinically safe? That's inevitable. And they do take clinical responsibility for the medicines that they prescribe. The BMA does say to GPs that they should not prescribe beyond their own knowledge or capability, sensible advice, and I can imagine GPs being nervous about prescribing what appears to be a medicine unlicensed for use in children. The next step has to be to look at evidence to make sure that it is licensed for use in children, and then, of course, to move on from there. What I can say, however, in the meantime, we have established a new service to assess, diagnose and provide ongoing support for children and young people with neurodevelopmental conditions, and we are investing £2 million a year to do so.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item is...